Hi and welcome to episode number 635 with whatsforcharred.com and the fifth episode of our Air Still series. This is the second part of making whiskey with LME. Okay, it's been about 9 days since we started fermenting and everything has fermented out very well. You'll see that all the yeast is collected at the bottom, but the liquid is not quite clear yet. At the top of the fermentation bucket, you can see a definite line where the fermentation foam was sitting. That's now subsided altogether, and there are just one or two bubbles on top of the liquid. Just below that you can see a slightly what appears to be a darker line, but that's actually a lighter line. That's where the yeast has started to precipitate towards the bottom of the bucket. Most of it is at the bottom, but your very fine particulate is still sitting in this section here. Now, some people don't mind that when they're distilling, when they get onto actually distilling the wash. But for the purpose of this video, I am going to clear this entirely so that it's 100% clear. It will still be a dark liquid because we used an amber LME as part of the mix, but it will be clear. So now, to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to decant some of this so that you can see the sediment or the smokiness in the liquid. As you can see, there is still quite a bit of sediment in the beer or in the wash. What I'm going to do is shine a light through it, and you'll actually see that it's still very murky, and we'd like to clear most of that out so that it is entirely clear before we go into the distilling phase. Many people say that they don't worry about a little bit of yeast left when distilling, and they still come out with really nice product. But a lot of other people also say that if you leave any yeast in the wash, that you end up with flavors that you don't want in your whiskey. So you can choose from this stage, you can choose whether you're going to clear the liquid or whether you're going to proceed as is. But for the sake of this video, as I said, we're going to clear. Now, to clear the liquid, we're going to use the simplest form of clarifying, using gelatin and cold crash. You can either use bovine gelatin or you can use vegetable-based gelatin. We'll show you how to do that shortly. Gelatin will speed up the cold crash process, which involves taking the fermentation container and putting it into the fridge. The gelatin is a positively charged molecule which will attract all of the suspended molecules or solids in the wash and precipitate them to the bottom of the container, along with all of the yeast at the bottom. To make up your gelatin solution, take a tablespoon or 15 milliliters of gelatin. Pour in about 250 mils of hot water, but not boiling, and let that stand for about 15 minutes to bloom. Okay, a couple of minutes and there we go. It's nicely dissolved in the liquid. Still a little bit too gelatinous, so what we're going to do is continue stirring until it's totally dissolved. And now to add this to the wash, I'm going to use a slotted spoon And we're just simply going to allow this to spread over the top of the wash. Just like that. Now this will go into the refrigerator for 2 to 3 days with the lid on, and by that stage everything should be substantially cleared, at least cleared enough to distill successfully. Okay, it's been about 3 days and the fermentation looks a lot clearer than it was. And you'll notice that the band of yeast at the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see it from this perspective, the band of yeast is about 6 millimeters thicker than it was previously, which means that the large majority of the yeast that was suspended in the wash has now precipitated. To show you this, I'm going to decant a little bit into a cylinder and we can have a look. As you can see, there is still a little cloudiness, but that certainly is a lot clearer than it was in the previous. Zoomed in, you'll be able to see. I'm happy with that, so we're going to run that off into the distiller, 4 liters at a time, and continue with the distillation. To continue, place the air still under the tap of the fermenting vessel. Place the boiling saddles into the distiller, and a half teaspoon of distilling conditioner, and open the tap. We're going to fill the still up to 4 liters, which is the full mark on the inside of the distiller container. I have cleared the tap by running off about 300 ml of the distillation into a separate vessel and discarding it. This is to get rid of any sediment or precipitated yeast that has fallen to the entrance of the tap while we were clearing the wash. The distiller has been turned on, and within an hour we should start seeing the first drops coming from the spout. It's been just over an hour and the first drips are appearing. Now, as I mentioned when the whiskey part of this series started, when we ferment grain-based alcohols, you do end up with acetones, aldehydes and methanol in the mixture. These are in very, very small proportions. However, it is a good idea to remove these in the foreshots. So what I'm doing, I have a tot glass underneath the nozzle and I'm going to collect 25 milliliters, and this should rid us of all of these nasties. In addition, I have 6 measuring jugs. They will collect 100 ml each, and as I go I will be testing the alcohol content of each batch. When the alcohol content drops to below 20%, that is when I will stop distilling. The first alcohol from the still after the 4 shots will be the heads. This will be followed by the hearts, and lastly by the tails. Now we are going to keep all of these. We're not going to discard them until we've done the smell test and the taste test. Then we'll blend these together to get the product that we want. Now this is very much a case of personal preference. Sometimes in your heads and your tails you will end up with unique tastes and flavors that you think might be pleasing in a whiskey. Then you'll add these. The ones that you don't think will be pleasing can be reprocessed with your next batch. The dripping has increased And yes, we're almost at 25 mils. At this stage, what I'm going to do is swap this out for one of the collection jars. And collect my first 100 mils. As suspected, the first 25 mils has a very strong acetone smell. So that's going to go down the sink. And we're going to continue collecting 200 milliliters. And we're almost at the 100 ml mark for the first collection. Swap that out. And now to take an alcohol reading on the first batch. It is not entirely necessary to read the first few batches because you know they're going to be way up. This is probably going to be between 60 and 80%, maybe even higher. Uh, 72% alcohol, ABV. From here on out it will drop with every batch, and we will discontinue the distilling process when it reaches 20%. Okay, the distillation is complete, and we've ended up with 12 100 ml samples ranging from 72% ABV down to 20% ABV. Now, ideally what you'd want to do is cover these loosely with a lint-free cloth for the night and let them mellow out for a couple of hours and before doing your tasting. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go ahead and do that. First of all, take your first sample. This is the first one out of the distiller, second, third, and so on down to number 12 over here. Give it a smell. You're going to sniff that. That smells pretty good. A little taste test. And it tastes pretty damn decent too. Second. Even better. Now we're heading into the hearts. Very sweet aroma. Give that a taste. Sweet and smooth, very good. Even better again. Very good. Still in the hearts. Very nice. Still in the hearts. Still in the hearts. And here I can actually smell, when we get to number 8, there's a difference in the aroma, which means that we are heading into the into the tails, but that still actually tastes very nice, so we're going to leave that there. And there again, the aroma has changed significantly. But still very smooth. So we're going to leave that one in. Here again, significant change on number 10, and the taste has dropped away noticeably, and I'm not going to anything from here onwards in the tails. I am actually going to now add that to another run, but now it's important to understand I'm not going to add this to a whiskey run, because that will actually be detrimental to the whiskey. I'm going to add it to a vodka run, because there is still a significant amount of alcohol in the tails, and that can be recovered in a vodka run. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take those out. That leaves us 900 milliliters of good stuff, which will go into our aging container. Not to forget that we still have another batch of wash to distill, but now we know that the first 900 mils, because it's coming from an identical wash, the first 900 mils we're going to keep, and that will cut down the time and effort in the second run. We can actually just run 900 mils straight and then cut it off. So what I've done, I've transferred the 900 mils of distilled liquid to a glass container. The glass container has a silicone seal on the lid, which is ideal for what we're looking at. I'm going to run the second batch right now, and that will be added to this, and then we'll burn some oak and add that for the aging process. The second run is complete, and here we have 1,800 milliliters of whiskey at 60% alcohol. What we're going to do now is burn some oak. This is European barrel oak. I have used American white oak with wonderful results, but today we're going to use this barrel oak. We need to char this a little bit, which we'll do shortly, and then pop it into the whiskey. This will sit in the whiskey at 60% for about 2 weeks, and then we'll dilute it to 50%, continue for another week or two, and then finally to 40%, and continue until you're happy with the taste of the whiskey. So let's get on with charring it. Normally this is something I would do outside in a well ventilated area, but today what we're going to do is just pop this into an old frying pan and zap it with the blowtorch. The frying pan is on top of a heat-proof silicone mat so that I don't burn the tabletop. I'm only going to char the one side, and then simply drop that into your whiskey. Initially that will float. As it absorbs more and more liquid, it will become heavier and sink to the bottom of the whiskey and do its job. So in a month or so that will be ready to try, and that will be closer to the end of this series, where we'll do a taste test in one of the later episodes. Thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe, like and share, and we'll see you again real soon.